that, just gathering. I'm sure you all do too, that gathering everyone together and huddling. And we were watching some football games last night, and, Michigan. And boy, it's tough to see those stands empty. But yay, Michigan, they won, right? Sorry, MSU, you lost, but if you're an MSU fan, but happy to see Michigan won. We were watching the Alabama game, and boy, good games. So can you tell we're kind of a football family? We're and a Michigan family too. So it's good to see you all, and it's great to be here with you. My name is Julie Burgess, and I bring you greetings from the Church Extension Fund of Michigan and also the LCMS Foundation, which is headquartered down in St. Louis, but I work they call us deployed. I'm a deployed gift planner, and so I work here in Michigan. I live here in Ann Arbor. My husband and I are members at St. Paul Lutheran Church. You guys might be familiar with that. My husband is actually the principal at St. Paul. And I was, in my previous life, I was the director of family life there until the foundation and Church Extension Fund gave me a new, offered me a new position. And so I've been through training with them and learned so many wonderful things about these wonderful organizations, and I'm here to share with you some of that. So we're going to get started here. Let me make sure I'm working technology right. This is just me. What we're going to be talking about today is called Transfer the Blessings, and it is called the Lifetime Plan for Giving. Now, if you're sitting here and you're thinking, we're all set, we have a will, we have a trust, we're good to go, we've made a gift to ministry and all those kind of things, that's okay, that's fine. But what I'm going to share with you is some information about how you might want to tweak your plan if you've already got one in place. If you don't have a plan in place, I can help you with that as well. I'm going to make sure some people here have folders. If you didn't get a blue folder from me, I just need one per giving unit or one per family. Okay, great. So I am called a gift planning counselor. That's my official title here in Michigan. And so I mainly work with congregations throughout Michigan. I'm working with your congregation now as well. We're starting, as you probably all know, starting an endowment. And one of the things that you can really do to help bless that endowment is to make planned gifts. Now, we're not talking about, when I talk about planned giving, we're talking about planned gifts that you leave. It could be now, but many times it's when God calls you home. So a lot of what I'm going to be sharing with you today is planned gifts for when church workers, that's important. Lutheran Church Extension Fund, now that's the whole body Lutheran Church Extension Fund. Concordia Publishing House, you can see the university systems, and you can see the LCMS Foundation is under that as well. Going on, let's see, I'm trying to keep this rolling with this. So our vision of what we call Transfer the Blessings is that every Christian would have a lifetime plan for giving, and that's for today, tomorrow, and then forever, as we like. That's our vision statement. I'm going to put a couple Bible verses up here, and I'd like for you to read them with me. Let's read the Psalm 24 one together. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. And then let's read the Genesis 2:15. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. And as you look at those two verses, is there something, a phrase or words that pop out at you that stand out to you in either of those two verses? Don't need to raise your hand, just shout it out.
Lord God is the subject.
There you go. God is the subject. Yep.
Taking care of things.
It's exactly. As you see here, the earth is the Lord's. What we have in this world, it's God's. And I'll tell you, during this whole election time and all the things that have been going on with coronavirus and riots and protests, the one thing that gives me a whole lot of peace is to know that we know how it ends. As Christians, we know who's in control, whether it's the Democrats that win or the Republicans that win, no matter what happens, we know God is in control. And so we don't need to go forward in fear. We go forward in faith and say, God has a plan. I need to be a faithful servant of his. And this also says that God took man and he put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. God also has blessed us. Would you all agree that you are blessed? Yeah, I mean, I just look at my own family. We've got 3 grown children. Our daughter's married. We have 2 granddaughters. And I look at that and go, we're so blessed. God has provided for us. We have a house. I mean, he's provided us with jobs and security and those things. We're blessed. And we have our church and we have friends. I mean, all of the things that you can look at around you and say, we are blessed. But God's given us these things to take care of. They're not ours to hold in. We're not supposed to be closed-fisted. We're supposed to be open to give. That's how God treated us. When he sent his son Jesus into this world to die on a cross for us and rise again, he did it with open hands. God doesn't hold back from us. He freely gives to us. And God just says, now I freely give to you. I want you to experience that same joy that I have in giving to you. So now I want you to give back to me. And it's a stewardship is what it is. And that's why we're called stewards of what God has given to us. So current stewardship efforts, let's just talk about a little bit about how we're doing with that. The church encourages people to be stewards of 100% of what God has given to them. But look at some statistics here. Only about 50% of people have living wills or trusts. Does that number surprise you at all? 70% of those people who have wills or living trusts need to have them updated. So if you haven't had your will and trust or will or trust looked at in the last I would say in the last 8 to 10 years, this would be a great time to do it. Have it reviewed. I can take a look at it. I'm not an attorney and I'm not a financial planner, but just another pair of eyes over it. I've been kind of trained as to help you explain, because a lot of times if you've had a will done or a trust done, your attorney may have just lined it all up, sent it over to you and said, here, sign it, you're good to go. But what does it all mean? So I can help explain some of that to you. And then the last statistic here, only 7 to 12% of people who go through an attorney attorney will give a gift to ministry. So a lot of times, and I've spoken to many attorneys and shared with them what we do as the foundation, and they will say, this is great because we don't do this. We don't know a lot about planned giving and how it works. They're not designed for that. And that's nothing against attorneys or financial planners. It's just not something that they talk about much. This is a very unique niche, if you want to call it that, with the foundation, where we actually go out. There's 18 of us throughout the United States as gift planners that go out and teach people about what planned giving looks like. So we have found that being prepared to die can be one of the greatest legacies to our children and our loved ones. And that sometimes can sound a little morbid, but it's not. Being prepared to die, being prepared to go home to the Lord. And there's some days when I look more forward to it than other days, especially in what's going on in our world. But it's a great legacy to hand off to your children and to your grandchildren and to those around you that are watching what you do. So people like to make a lot of excuses like you see up here on the screen. But in the end, we do know God's going to call us home someday. We don't know when that day is, but we do know God will call us home. So stewardship opportunities through what we call the lifetime plan for giving. One of the most important things that I think on this is writing that statement of faith. If you'd open up in your folders and look on the left-hand side of your folder, and does anybody need a folder? Mike, you want one? You can just take a look at it. You see on the left-hand side, you'll see something called the legacy, or maybe it's called a Christian preamble. Let me get mine open here. Sample Christian preamble and family blessing. There's a couple of those in there that are samples. That's one of the things we do as gift planning is we help you design a Christian preamble to share with your family. And basically what this is saying is, hey, don't worry about me. I'm with Jesus now. But these are some things that I want to share with you about my faith, about how much I love you, my family, and then how much I love the Lord. And we really encourage that you share this with your family before God calls you home. That you gather the kids, the grandkids, your friends, whoever your beneficiaries are going to be, those people that are most important to you, you gather them around maybe at Thanksgiving or Christmas time or just any time is good. Get them all in one room together and share with them your family blessing. This is biblical. If you remember some, in the Old Testament, you can remember some of those stories of passing on the blessing. Abraham did it. Some of these wonderful mentors of faith that we have in Scripture that did these types of things. So that's a huge blessing. And also just to keep in mind, as you're writing a gift plan to provide for your family, one of the things that we like to also, share with people, and this has been backed up with research, is that leaving a large lump sum distribution to your family is not always the best way to bless them. And just like sometimes leaving a large sum distribution to your church to just say, here's this big chunk of money, you guys figure out how you're going to use it. Not always a good idea. So that's why I'm working with your congregation right now, and we're setting up an endowment with your congregation. And what that endowment just means is that when someone does leave a large lump sum, you all now at Peace will say, we have a vehicle to take care of that. We have things in place to make sure that when a large lump sum of a gift, of a blessing is given to our church, that it's not just going to go to pay the bills, that we have a process of what we're going to use that for. And that's why an endowment can be a huge blessing to your congregation. So a lifetime plan for giving includes these things: a will with naming guardians and minor trusts. So if you've got little ones, you do need to have a will if your children are younger, because a will designates who's going to be taking care of those children if God calls you home. And keep in mind, if you don't have a will, the state is then going to decide who takes care of those children. And just a couple of things about the difference between a will and a trust that most of you might know this already, but a will still has to go through probate. A will does not keep your estate out of probate. It will still go through probate. A will does give directives on who gets this, who takes care of this, those kind of things. A trust stays out of probate, and a trust also is a flow through to where money gets distributed. If you didn't have a beneficiary for something, well, the trust is what's going to take care of that. The trust also stays private. A will can be public. Somebody could go to the county courthouse, and if you passed away, and let's say you've got a second cousin twice removed, and maybe when you were, 20 years old, you said, hey, yeah, when I die, you can have this. That person can go and look at your will. They can see what your estate was worth. They can contest it, which means they can stop things. Sometimes a will going through probate can take up to a year to get through probate. And if you don't have a will, for instance, you guys, do you know he passed away a few years ago, the singer Prince? He was worth like millions of dollars. Did you know that he died without a will? That cost thousands, and I can't even imagine how much money that cost. And his family, all of those loved ones, the pain that family had to go through. So he died without a will. Yeah. So just keep that in mind as well. So a will be naming guardians and minor trusts. A revocable living trust or a pour-over will, that's kind of what we're talking about with a trust. Revocable, just to kind of give you a definition here, a revocable means it can be changed up until the day God calls you home. So a lot of what I'm going to share with you today, you can put it in place today, and it can be changed. That's what revocable means. Irrevocable means once it's in place, you can't change it. It's locked in. So if you decide, we didn't want to do that, we want to change it, it's irrevocable. Revocable means nothing happens until God calls you both home, or if you're an individual, until God calls you home. Durable power of attorney for financial and for health care. Those are very important also. You need those because if I've got parents that are both in their 80s, I've got in-laws that are both in their 80s. If something happens to them and they can't make decisions properly, you need to have someone that you trust, that loves you, that knows your heart, that's going to be able to make those decisions for you. That's very important. And then also we'll review all of the ownership issues, the beneficiary designations, making sure all of those are in proper order. Because just keep in mind, if you've got everything in place, a will and a trust and all that's in place, but let's say you did a life insurance policy and it was 40 years ago or whenever that you did this life insurance policy, and you put a beneficiary as maybe, I'm not saying this was you, but maybe you had a former spouse. You kept that person on as the beneficiary and you never changed it. When you pass away, if that person is still named as the beneficiary, that supersedes anything that you've done. That beneficiary will supersede your will or trust. So you do need to make sure your beneficiaries are just in the right order. We just go over that with you, and I'll make sure that that's all in place. Because talking to attorneys, they will tell me, when I've shared with them that we do all of this, that every attorney I've talked to has said, you know what, that's great, because we don't do that. We get them to sign the will, we get them to take care of the trust, and then it's up to them to make sure beneficiaries all get taken care of. So that's a huge thing. Beneficiaries are a huge thing when you're doing planned giving and estate planning. So a lifetime plan for giving might include the following. So these are just some of the vehicles that we use in planned giving. It might include a simple gift left through a will or trust. Okay, that's called a bequest, where you just say, we want to give X percentage or X amount of dollars to your favorite ministries or your favorite charities, okay? It could be a charitable trust. And I'll explain a little bit more about what a charitable trust is. And by the way, a charitable trust can be amended and can be attached to your existing will and trust that you have in place now. You can do a gift annuity, a donor advised fund, or family endowment. And we're going to get into that a little bit more here as we get through the presentation. So the lifetime plan for giving process, there's 4 steps to it. The first one is the discovery step, and this is where we meet with you, and I'll do a survey with you. If you look on the right side of your folder, there's 2 booklets in the back. One's a survey and one's a guide. The survey is the part you fill out, giving me names of family members, grandchildren, people that are important to you that you would want to leave a gift to. Then you also fill out your assets. There's one coming that's going to be actually electronic, that I can just email it to you, but you can do it on paper or electronically. But then you fill out your assets, your liabilities, all that information I need so that, and then the most important part of that survey, I think, is page 9 in that booklet. That's your stewardship goals. And that's where you and your spouse sit down together and you talk about what are your goals for while you're still living, and then when God calls you home. And that's the part we really talk about. And I'll sit with you, and that's probably our longest time we meet, and that might be like about an hour to an hour and a half, where I just get to listen to you share your stories about your family, about the love you have for the ministries, whether it's your church, or maybe it's a seminary, or maybe it's any 501c3 that you have a heart for. I gather all that information together. And then we come upon the design, and the design is where I take all your information and I'll put it into some plans, and I'll give you a number of different options. Well, you could do this, or you could do this, and we'll take a look at all of it. You can take it to your financial planner. You can run it past your attorney if you have one. And we just talk about all the different options you might have with the assets that you have, okay? Once we decide on a plan, and you get to pray about it, you get to talk about it. It's not like, come on, you got to make a decision right now. I'm not selling anything. I don't get any kind of commission off of this. What I do for you and what I do for Peace is all free of charge. I'm not getting any kind of bonus or anything involved in this. This is simply a ministry that the Foundation and Church Extension Fund is offering to congregations and Lutheran members here in Michigan. And so then once you decide on that plan, we do the summary, and that is where you've selected the plan. And I have the attorneys at the foundation. We have fabulous attorneys. I was just with them this past week down in St. Louis. Fabulous attorneys that put together your whole plan for your charitable giving. And then they'll send that to your attorney to attach. If you already have a trust and a will, they'll attach it or amend it to your existing plan that you have. And then it's just the implementation, and this is where you may have to meet with the attorney. You may have to sign something. This is where everything gets drafted, and this is where then I come back around and say, okay, let's make sure all those beneficiaries are in the proper order. We'll just take a look at all of that, and I'll help you make sure that's all taken care of. So I'm that person that just kind of walks you through it all, helps you, answers any question. The guide that goes along with that survey is a great resource if you don't know what something means. Like, oh, what is what is a donor advised fund? What did she say that was again? Well, it's in that guide. It gives you a lot of definitions to terminology, because there's, when you do any kind of estate planning, there's letters, there's definitions, there's all kinds of stuff, and it just gets a little crazy sometimes. So there's a guide in there, and if you don't know something, you'll have me as a resource to just say, Julie, what was this again? And to be honest, if I don't know what it is, I have a whole team of 50 people back in St. Louis at the International Center. That's where our office is stationed at. Then I can contact and I can say, hey, we have this question about this. And there are 3 fabulous attorneys, tax attorneys there. There's a whole slew of, there's trust administrators there that will help us figure it out if I don't know the answer to it. So I can assure you of that. So the promises of a gift planning counselor, so me as your gift planning counselor, I will pray with you, I will listen to you, those are so important. I will give you ideas. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I will give you ideas, and I will encourage you to keep moving things forward. Don't, sometimes we get started on something and then we go, we can wait, or we can put this off. I'll be that one saying, okay, in 3 weeks, or how about in a month? Let's meet back together. A gift plan, putting this all together, can take anywhere from about 2 months to maybe 6 months. But I really try to just keep the process moving, because you all know life gets busy, and sometimes we just get swamped with things. And so I'll be that person to just say, hey, come on, let's get this going. Let's keep things moving. I'll keep your information confidential. That's one of the promises that I make to you as well. And then also, like I said earlier, I don't charge you for anything. So all that we do is a gift to you and as a blessing for you. Your gift planning team, so obviously your attorney. So if you don't have an attorney, I have interviewed attorneys throughout Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, Dexter, that I've talked to that do understand charitable giving. There are some attorneys that love it, and there are some attorneys that know nothing about it. And so I've actually had to explain to some of them how it all works. And once they hear it, they go, well, this is great. Because we do a lot of the heavy lifting for the attorneys, and they go, well, so this is great. So my client comes in, they've already been educated and taught what they need to know, and then it saves on attorney fees too, because if you've ever heard that word billable hours, they can get a little expensive too. You would need to, if you have an investment advisor or an insurance advisor, and then your family members, we encourage you to share your plan with your family members, to talk about this. Remember how I talked about that Christian preamble, that family blessing? Well, include this with it. Get the family around, and when you do this blessing with the family, share with them, now Johnny, this is your part of the estate, and Susie, this is your part of the estate, and let them ask you questions. And if you're a little nervous to do that, just let me know, and I can be there with you. And I can be there to help answer any questions that the family might have. And they might say, well, Mom and Dad, why are you doing this? And I can kind of show them how it's going to work. So that, if somebody gets upset about something, or somebody just, sometimes you get flustered around your own kids when they start asking questions, because some of our kids are pretty smart kids, and can get a little intimidating if you've got somebody there that's firing questions at you. So I'm the person that offers to be there with you. I'll go with you to your attorney if you want me to go with you to your attorney. I don't have to, but if you feel more comfortable and I can answer any questions, I'm happy to do that as well. So a couple of things that you may or may not be aware of is the Secure Act of 2019. You may have heard of what used to be called a stretch IRA, and that was where the IRS said if you gift your investment assets to your children, they can stretch out those assets for 20 years. And that means that those kids don't have to pay all the taxes up all at once. Well, the IRS, as we all know, loves to change things, and they decided, you know what? We want our money a little faster than that, so we're getting rid of that stretch IRA. The longest that your beneficiaries can stretch that out now is 10 years. So that means they have to pay the taxes at a faster rate on that. Also, they removed the 70.5 age limit on IRA contributions. Something you might want to keep in mind. And when we're talking about IRAs, I'm talking about traditional IRAs. Roth IRAs are different. Roth IRAs are you put your money in before you paid the tax on it already. So you've paid the tax on it now, and so everything in the Roth IRA grows tax-free. So with a Roth IRA, they don't care when you get your money out, because you already paid the tax on it. So all the growth on a Roth IRA is tax-free. This is a traditional IRA. So traditional IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, TSAs, those are all assets that we and the gift planning world say those are taxable assets. that really need to be looked at when you're gift planning, because those are the assets that your family is going to be paying the tax on. So they increased the required minimum distribution. You might hear it sometimes called an RMD, required minimum distribution. They've changed that from 70 and a half to 72. So if you've turned 70 and a half after December of 2019, I think it is, let me check that number. If you've turned, you don't have to start taking that RMD, because when you take it, you get taxed on it. Everything's got a tax. It's kind of frustrating. So if you are 70 and a half, you don't have to start taking that. You can, but you don't have to. Some people say, I don't need it because I have pension, I have some savings. So those are all things that we can look at as well. The floor for medical expenses for itemized deductions, that stays at 7.5%. I don't know if, a couple years ago they changed all that itemizing, and so a lot of us don't even itemize anymore because of the changes in the tax laws. And there's a lot of different provisions that have been changed. There's also the CARES Act. This just happened, the CARES Act of March. This happened March 27th of 2020. I don't know if you're aware of this, but now there is a $300, you know how your giving, your charitable giving, it just kind of got lumped into that one big, they don't itemize anymore, you just get this deduction. Like if you're married, it's now $24,000, and if you're single, it's $12,000. So now they've said, well, with the CARES Act, we want people to give to nonprofits. So now they've said it's got to be cash. You can give a cash donation up to $300, and it's above the line, which means it just comes right off of your, that when you're doing your taxes, it comes off before you start doing anything else. So it comes right off of the income that you have. There's increases to charitable deduction limits to 100% of your adjusted gross income for cash gifts, and the required minimum distribution was waived for 2020 with COVID. So if you're not sure about some of those, it's October, almost November. So if you want to check on some of those, I would suggest you get a hold of your tax person ASAP, because they're getting swamped with a lot of this stuff. So if there's some changes or some things that you want to do, there's also, and I'm not going to get into a whole lot of this, but there's also, you can still take advantage of what's called the qualified charitable distribution. So if you have to make a required, that required minimum distribution, well, the qualified charitable distribution, if you are 70 and a half or older, you can make a direct gift to Peace or to a ministry up to $100,000 from your IRA, and it doesn't, and it's not claimed as a distribution on your income. So there's some perks to that as well. If you need to take a required minimum distribution, but you don't really want it, if you all know some of you are sitting here nodding your head, you might know what I'm talking about here. Check with your tax person on that, but make sure that if you are going to give a qualified charitable distribution, do not run it through your bank account. Have it a direct transfer over to the charitable institution that you're giving to, whether it's Peace or another ministry or another 501c3. Do not run it through your bank account, because then it's going to get added on to you as income. So, all right, let's keep going, because I know we're doing okay with time. So, can you help me develop a gift plan for my favorite ministry? So some of the areas that we focus on is here at Peace, local congregation. If you have a school that you're near and dear to, like a Christian school, St. Paul's a great opportunity. I'll just put a little plug in there. Any kind of missions, human care ministries, even pro-life ministries. Now, one of the things, if you do want to give to Planned Parenthood, we do not do that. So anything that disagrees with the LCMS teachings, we do not. I would have to tell you, I'm sorry, we can't do that. So if it is a ministry that, I just think Planned Parenthood, or if it's a ministry that just disagrees, that doesn't give social, as far as we are non-discriminatory, those kind of things. So keep that in mind. Christian education ministries, so seminaries, universities, all of our Concordias, those kind of things. And then others, it's like Compassion, crisis pregnancy centers, yes, you can give to those. Humane Society, yes, you can give to those. Those are all ministries that would be would be in agreement with the LCMS teachings. But just to keep you aware of all of that. So let's take a look at a lifetime plan for giving. Now, remember I mentioned a bequest. And let's say you just want to give a certain amount or a percentage from your estate when you are called home. So this doesn't happen until you're called home. There's your estate, as you can see in that big box there. You give a gift to your family, and then you give a gift to ministry. That's called the bequest. It's very simple. If you haven't done one, we can write one up for you. Our attorneys can, and send it over to your attorneys. And you can give a percentage, or you can give an actual amount. And I'll explain that when we meet personally one-on-one with you. Let's take a look at some examples of bequests. Would be maybe, like I said, a percentage from your will or living trust to your favorite ministries, and it can be more than one, so keep that in mind as well. You could do a beneficiary designation of the IRA, the individual retirement account, or a tax-deferred asset. You can just make that ministry that beneficiary. Say, well, my kids don't need it, or I don't have children to give it to, or grandchildren to leave it to. You can leave peace as your beneficiary. Pretty cool thing, but you can do that. A beneficiary designation of life insurance. If you've got term or whole life and you want to, you're like, my family's not going to need it, I've got this whole life policy or a term policy. Usually whole life is more that gets used on this. You can change a beneficiary designation to your church or to your favorite ministry, and you can designate it to that. And you can do it by percentages. You don't have to do the whole thing. Ministry-owned life insurance would be that. That's where you give it. Now that would be something to look at. Designation of an asset to ministry. Let's say you've got a stock or a mutual fund that's outside of your IRA, and if it's coming due, we'll talk about it in a little bit, you might want to transfer some assets over to a ministry because you don't want to pay the tax on it. You're just going to get hit hard on taxes. Or a gift annuity that remembers ministry. A gift annuity is where you put a certain amount into it. Let's say you've got $25,000 that you want to gift. You actually get an income off of that. It's an annuity, so you get a yearly income from that for a certain amount of time, and then at the end of that time, then the rest of that is given as gifted to a ministry that you designate. So, read this one with me from Proverbs 20:21. It says, an inheritance gained quickly in the beginning will not be blessed in the end. All right, Proverbs is one of those wisdom chapters or wisdom books of the Bible. The problem, and you heard me mention this earlier, the problem with a lump sum distribution is that this isn't me saying this is actually statistics. If you give a lump sum distribution to your children, many times it is gone within 18 months. And it doesn't matter if you leave them $5,000 or $5 million. It's more about the toys, and it's just bigger toys or bigger parties or bigger vacations. Not that that's a bad thing, but in a lump sum, and I've heard stories after stories of, yep, I left, this person was left a large chunk of money. They didn't know how to manage it, and it was gone. I just heard someone share with me yesterday. They said this person was gifted by their grandparents a large inheritance. He's an alcoholic and a drug addict. And so a lot of that money was just gone. He was using it. He went crazy. It sent him off the deep edge. His parents stepped in. Thankfully, his parents stepped in, got a hold of the funds. He agreed to it. He got into help. He's doing great now. He ended up buying himself a house. He's going back to school. But now he regrets all of that money he wasted from his grandparents, from their inheritance. He wasted, kind of that prodigal son story. He wasted it, but now at least he's on a good path now, and he's doing good things with it. So there are ways that you can design your inheritance so that if you do have, we always jokingly, and it's said if you have more than one child, at least one of them's going to be a stinker. So, I don't know, we have 3, and I know one of mine would go crazy if we gave him a huge lump sum. So, those are things to think about, and we talk about that when we talk about planning your estate as well, or planning your gifts to your children also. Things you just want to take into consideration on that. Some kids are great with money. They would invest it. They would do well with it. They'd, pay off the house or put up, for the grandkids, the college funds, whatever. And then you got some kids that would be like, they wouldn't know how to use it. And honestly, it's not going to change. You've heard about people that win the lottery. Somebody wins the lottery and you think, oh, great, they're going to really get their life on track. They're really going to get everything. No. If they're bad with money before they win the lottery, or if they're bad with money before they get gifted with a huge inheritance, it's not going to make them any better with money after. So it's a good thing to just keep that in mind. So let's take a look at a couple of situations here, and these are just completely fictitious. This is Jerry and Susan. Jerry and Susan wanted to avoid the lump sum distribution of their tax-deferred assets to their children. Okay, so that would be like their IRA, their 401k. They didn't want to give them that lump sum distribution because they were going to get hit hard on taxes on it. The kids were going to get hit hard on taxes. So this is after Jerry and Susan are called home. They also wanted to include a gift to their favorite ministries in their plan. So let's look at an option here. Tax-deferred assets are really not intended for a lump sum inheritance because of the tax implications. So if you can see here on the screen, the tax-deferred assets, the IRA, 401k, a KEO, a SEP, a TSA, annuities, those kind of things, they're going to flow through the federal income tax and the state income tax. So they're going to get hit with a 35 or even higher income tax that the kids are going to have to pay on it before it ever reaches them. That can be thousands and thousands of dollars that your children are going to have to pay on that tax on that. And there are ways to get around that by setting up what we call a Give It Twice charitable trust. This is one vehicle. There are many options here, but let's say that Jerry and Susan took their estate, and as you can see in the first box, their estate is worth $800,000. The children, right at the time Jerry and Susan both are called home, okay, so maybe Susan was called home first and 10 years later Jerry was called home. None of this happens until Jerry is called home, okay? So the children received the $600,000 of that, and that might have been the home, the bank account, the life insurance, if there was any jewelry or cars, any of that property, it could have been a vacation home or something like that, that goes directly to the kids. But Jerry and Susan had $200,000 that was in an IRA or a 401k. Well, instead of giving that right away to the kids, it flowed through a charitable trust. And the charitable trust, that $200,000, and remember when I talked to you about the foundation is a trust arm of the synod? Well, the foundation took the $200,000. It was given to them to invest. They don't keep it, they don't use it in any way, but they invest it. And then every year, remember that stretch IRA? Well, for 20 years, the kids are going to get a payment from that $200,000. And it's going to be, you can do it for 10 years, 15 years, or 20 years. 20 years is the best if you have a large amount of it. So the kids will get a payment from that for 20 years. Yes, there will be a tax on it, but not in a lump sum. It'll be a smaller, and it may not, hopefully it doesn't raise them or kick them up into the next tax bracket. So for 20 years, until that whole $200,000 is paid out to the kids or to their beneficiaries, or it can also be to a ministry, that payment is made. After those 20 years, because the foundation had been investing that $200,000 and paying 5% to the family, the corpus, or the main principle of that $200,000 was never touched. So now it's left to give to ministry. So now when you put something, let's say when Jerry and Susan put this plan together, they said, well, we want 50% of it to go to our church. We want 25% of it to go to, let's say, one of the Concordias, let's say Concordia and Arbor. We want 10% of it to go to the Humane Society. We want 10% of it to go to Compassion and our Compassion Pregnancy Center. I mean, they can leave a list, a long list of different ministries that they want to gift that money to. So that's what a charitable remainder trust. That's what that would look like. Okay? So the family still gets their money, but it's called giving twice. So you've used those taxable assets to give to your kids, but also it flows through the foundation, it flows through the trust of the foundation, and then it's given out to ministries as well. So let's look at Harold and Ann. Harold and Ann wanted to sell appreciated securities. So that's things you've invested in and then they've grown, like stocks, those kind of things. But they want to avoid the capital gains tax. You may have heard of that nasty little word before. They want increased retirement income, and they want to include a gift to their favorite ministries in their plan. So let's just take a look, just to kind of fill you in on securities real quick. Anheuser-Busch a few years ago, I grew up around the St. Louis area. That's my home, and then I married a Michigan boy, so that's why we're here. But Anheuser-Busch a few years ago was selling off. All their shareholders had to sell their stock. They were selling off. And they said, shareholders, you have to sell all your stock. Well, the shareholders had received that stock at a cost basis of $1. And now that stock is going to be $70 a share. That means they have $69 per share of capital gains. Okay, well, you think, well, $69 isn't a lot. Well, but look at this. Let's just look at an example here. Current value, let's say somebody had 6,000 shares at $50 per share. Okay, so the number's a little different here, but that's $300,000. Their original cost basis was only $20. So that $120,000 of that they don't owe on, but the capital gain is $180,000. That means that they would have to pay, that person that owns those shares would have to pay $27,000 in capital gains taxes, and that's at a 15% rate. So let's look at what we can do to help, there we go, almost hit the wrong one. So let's see what we can do to help our couple here. This is Harold and Ann. So Harold and Ann, in a Giving Twice charitable trust, they can take their estate. It's $900,000. When Harold and Ann, now some of this was set up while they were still living, because remember they wanted some income yet while they were still living in retirement. So they set it up to where when they're called home, their children get $600,000 of it, but they took $300,000 of it. That were those taxable assets that, you know, we're going to pay capital gains on. They ran it through a charitable unified trust. It's called a CRUT. And they got income for both of their lives at $15,000 a year. And then when they were called home, then it went to ministry. So it's a little bit different. You can actually generate it so that you get income while you're still living. It's kind of like an annuity in that respect. And then you can gift it because the basis of it, the $300,000, was never touched. Then it was gifted to ministry after that. So here's Ken and Marion. Ken and Marion have a long list of things they want to do, but they don't want to care for rental property anymore. Some of you might have rental property or farmland. You may not want to, or vacation property. You don't want to care for it anymore. You don't need income at the present time. You want to take advantage of a tax-free transfer to ministry, okay? You don't want to give the entire gift to ministry right now. You want to make gifts to various ministries over time. You want to encourage your children, their philanthropic attitude. You want to teach them how to give as well. And they can use charitable gift deduction for increased income and more gifting. Okay, well, that sounds like a long list, but believe it or not, there's some really cool things that they can do with that. So they set up a family gift fund. This is involving the family in giving to ministry. So their entire estate was at $600,000. That rental property they sold, and they put it into what's called a donor-advised fund, similar to an endowment, but it's a family donor-advised fund. They put $100,000 in there, and every year they get to use maybe about 4% of that. Again, the foundation invests that for them. They get to use with their family and gift different charities, different ministries, and they're teaching their family who they want to bless with that. Do we want to give it to this organization or that organization? And they can change that every year, okay? And then their children were going to get the $500,000 right away. And then on this one, the donor advised fund was going to get the whole $100,000. The kids weren't going to get any part of that $100,000. They just set it up that way. So this allows gifts of appreciated property to be made and distributed to different ministries over time. So this is another way that if you said, well, we want to give to the endowment fund here at Peace, but maybe we also want to give to other ministries. You can set up a donor advised fund, and you can gift every year. You can decide who you want to gift it to. You can leave that also to your children, that donor advised fund, or a family endowment. Those are things that you can also do with it to bless ministries and other 501c3s that you care about. So the desired outcome is this. Complete a lifetime plan for giving, thoughtfully, carefully, and prayerfully, I'd want to add. Leave a legacy of faith, that the family blessing that we talked about. Passing on gifts God has entrusted to you, to family or heirs, as a blessing. And then bless your favorite ministries. And then what we say is accomplish the Great Commission, which is go out and teach others and bring others to know about Jesus through building up and encouraging our congregations and our churches and our schools. I think in what's going on in our country today and in our world today, I think now more than ever, we need our fabulous churches and our Christian schools that are teaching our children and are teaching us and filling us up with the joy of the Lord so that the Holy Spirit can work through us to help others. So what do we do now? Well, you pray that the Lord will work through you to bear fruit. That's one big thing. So you're going to take that packet home that I gave you. There's a lot of information in there, and in the back, underneath the sample Christian preambles on the left side, there are some examples similar to what I shared with you. These are from John and Marie Lutheran, so obviously they're just mock-ups. But there's an example in here of how a charitable, this one happens to be setting up a donor advised fund. There's some examples in there of how you can gift your family, similar to what we talked about. You'll see 4 boxes at the top. We're going to run short on time here in a little bit. But this is something you can take a look at. And if you want to do some more educating on yourself, you can read through the guide, the survey. There's a lot of information in here as well. There's also a ministry report from 2019. That ministry report shows you the foundation, what the gifts have been given to ministries and through other institutions through the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. It's pretty impressive because it's in the millions and millions of dollars. So it's like eye-popping. And by the way, even through COVID, we just had a report from our the trust part of our foundation. We're doing good. We're doing good because when the one thing about the foundation is they invest for the long term. So they're not doing any kind of crazy day trading or anything like that. There's 15 different trust administrators that oversee all of the investment, and it's invested with a company called NEPC, and that they manage over $1 trillion of investments, and so we get some of the highest rates at the lowest fees. So it's a huge blessing to our ministries and to our congregations. But one of the things I would ask that you would do at this time is there is just some information from you. If you'd pull out on the right side of your folder, giving me name and phone number, just contact information, and also it would help me just evaluate me on how this presentation went. Was it helpful to you? Do you want to sit down and talk? I would be happy to contact you. If you don't, please fill out the information anyway, and if you aren't interested in talking to me any further, that's fine. I'm not gonna give your information to anybody else, and I'm not gonna hound you or call you constantly, but if you do want to meet with me, I'll get in touch with you either through email or through a phone call, and we can talk more. And also keep in mind, because of COVID, so many of us are so good at technology these days. There is Zoom, there's Teams, there's all kinds of ways. We can even meet virtual. We can meet here at the church if you don't want me in your home, and I understand that, and I will come with a mask. But we can meet many different ways. So if you just want to sit down with me and go over some stuff with me, that's fine. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to help and be a servant to you all. So feel free to fill out that evaluation. Let me know what you thought of the presentation that I did with you today, and I'd really appreciate that as well because that helps me also. So do you all have we got a few minutes here, any questions that you might have? I know I talked fast. I know it's a lot of information. I apologize. There's a lot to get in, and I know I want to honor Pastor Andy had said by about 10:40, the next service is going to be starting at 11. They need to get things set up here. But anybody have any questions or any comments? Did I leave you with more questions or more scratching of the head? Or everybody's wearing their masks and doesn't want to talk. Do you all understand? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
We have a trust. I think it's a revocable trust. Bought into it many years ago. Could we get out of that trust and create another one?
Wait.
What you're advising?
I'm not advising that at this time, but you did say it's revocable, so there's your key word. It can be changed. Okay, so we could take a look at it and we can just see. I'm not going to tell you, yes, get out of it. We'll take a look at it. We'll see how it's set up, and we'll go from there. So it's not, I'm not going to tell you right now without knowing your whole situation, right? So the big words that we use in the foundation is, it depends. And it depends on how what's set up as, and it might be just fine, and we may be able to tweak a few things, and it may just work fine for you. Yeah, so. And that's a great question, because that's another thing. Keep in mind, if you already have something in place, you just want a pair of eyes to look at it and give you some, well, it could be this. Like, met with a couple last week, time's flying by, and he shared with me, he said, you know what, I didn't realize all of my assets from my 401k, it's just going to go to my daughter. He goes, I didn't realize she was going to have to pay all the tax on that. So he said, let's talk and let's see how we can change that. And I said, absolutely, we can change that so that she doesn't get hit with all the taxes on it. So there are ways to get around that. So I don't know about any of you, but I really don't like to leave money to the government if I don't have to. I mean, I pay my taxes, you know, render unto Caesar. I get that, and I totally agree with that. But if there's ways that I don't have to give Caesar more than what I'm supposed to, I am more than happy to look at those options. Glad to hear that. Yeah. Anybody else? Well, I wanted to also mention to you, I did bring some information from Church Extension Fund. I noticed on your table you have some of that as well. But Church Extension Fund also provides some short-term ways to invest money also. And I know you all have had Church Extension Fund. I think they've been here to talk to you maybe about some things. But you also have that match program through Church Extension Fund where you can invest money with them. It's a better rate of return than you're getting at the bank. So if you've got some money that you're just, you know, using it kind of as a rainy day fund, setting it aside, and you want to move that over to the Church Extension Fund, they will invest it for a short term, and then you can, you know, get a little bit better rate of return. Keep in mind, the foundation, we don't do any personal investing. So you can't go to the foundation and get an IRA or, you know, invest it on your own. But that's not what the foundation's about. The foundation does more corporate investing, like for a church. You know, like now for your estate, they would invest that money for you on a larger scale. But you can't go to them and say, hey, I want to get an IRA. That you need. That. I will tell you, the Church Extension Fund does offer IRAs, and you can transfer your IRA over to the Church Extension Fund or a Roth IRA over to the Church Extension Fund as well. And they'll invest it and use, obviously they're going to use it to benefit the congregations, but you're still going to get blessed with the interest rate from it. Okay? So pick up some information. You've got my card. It's on your folder. It's attached there. You're going to take that home and you get that wonderful pen. And by the way, those are awesome pens. I'm a pen kind of person. But you're going to take that folder home, and then if you want to take a look through some of that, but I would like the evaluation sheets back before we leave here, and I would like to close in prayer also, if you would join with me in prayer if we don't have any other questions. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this opportunity, Lord, to be together and worship. Boy, Lord, you have taught us after this experience we've gone through with COVID to never take advantage of the blessings of being together and worship together and have our voices sing praise to you and pray with a corporate group of Christian believers. Lord, we thank you for that. We thank you for peace. Thank you for Pastor Andy and the work that he's doing here in his congregation. Lord, we thank you for the blessings that you have given to this congregation. And Lord, we thank you in advance for the blessings that you are bringing to this congregation. So Lord, I pray that as you have gifted me with the ability to share what the Foundation and Church Extension Fund can bring to churches and to individuals and members, Lord, I pray that this work would be a blessing to you, to furthering the kingdom of God, and to our congregations and our members here on this earth. Thank you for the people, Lord, that are here today. I pray that you would watch over all of us, that you keep us safe as we travel home, that you would guide us through our week, Lord, and remind us to overflow with your love and with your generosity in our words and in our actions. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, thank you all. You've got my information. I've got a cell phone number. You can call or text me. You've got my email. Feel free to get in touch with me, but I do want those evaluations back, and then the rest of it is yours to take home. So thank you so much. And if you have any questions, you want to talk to me privately, I'll be here for a little while.